and Barabbas being chosen over him, and now he's been delivered to be crucified. So we see in Mark chapter 15 and verse 20, it says, when they had mocked him, they took off the purple from him and put his own clothes on him and led him out to crucify him. I guess, they felt that other stuff was too nice for him to take out there. And thank you, sir. Appreciate that very much. Okay. Yeah, good. All right. So tonight we will pick up, like I said, as they are taking him to Golgotha, from Pilate to Golgotha. Now, let me ask you this question. Anybody knows what Golgotha means? Place of the skull. What language is it? Who said that? Very good, Luke. Very good. If I had cookies, I'd give you one right now. But you're right. In the Hebrew, it's Golgotha. And so what we have here is, let's see, how do I put this? According to the Catholic tradition, over in this general area is where Jesus was crucified and buried. So they have what they call the Via Dolorosa, which, winds around and comes down here. But, and I'll explain this, the Protestants, which we are not one of, but we do have similar beliefs to many of the Protestants. We did not come out of the Catholic Church, so we're not the Protestants in that respect. But there are many things that line up similar to what we believe, that the Protestants do believe. So this is where Pilate's hall would have been in the city. This is actually a map off of Google Maps right now, okay? And it would have come down this street, and I'll show you pictures along the way that come out and go out the Damascus Gate, go out north of the old city, and up to the Garden Tomb. So we'll look at some of those pictures tonight. Some are my pictures, some that I have found elsewhere. But we see here, shortly after leaving Pilate's hall, they come out. And this is, if you were to have turned around the other direction, you would have seen the arch that we looked at a couple weeks ago, okay? This arch right here. So basically, what you see here, looking that way, is beyond this, okay? So, right out here somewhere in this general area, maybe a little ways further, they encounter a man, okay? Jesus is bearing his cross. They encounter a man, okay? And if somebody would have Mark chapter 15 and verse 21 and like to read that, that would be great. And I'll give you a couple other verses. Somebody like Luke 23 and 27 and Luke 23, 32. Okay? Who has the Mark verse? Brother Ben, okay? And who has my first Luke verse? Luke 23, 27. Okay, and then Luke, you got the other Luke? 23 and 32. Okay, I'll get to all of them. All right. So, Brother Ben. Yeah, Cyrene. Okay, so here we see a man shortly after they get out on the street. Now, some of these streets are still Time of Christ streets. Some of these have been built up on over the years. But this would have been the basic direction that we are looking at going. This is facing west, by the way, okay? North, south, east, and west, okay? So this is going west out of the Basilica, okay? Now, for those who have been to Israel, we made this trek, okay? And we'll be looking at the pictures of it here in just a little bit, okay? So I forget how many stations there are in the Catholic Via Dolorosa, Stations of the Cross, they call it. We didn't do all the Stations of the Cross because it went to a different location. But nevertheless, we took what would have been probably the way that they went as close as possible because a lot of building and things have happened since then. Okay, so we come out of the area of the arch, the pavement, the Ecce Homo, the Behold the Man arch, and walk west down this street. How many, those of you been there, how wide would you say that street was? Yeah, maybe, yeah. But that didn't keep them from not driving down through there, did it? You got to get against the wall, right? Right. So then Jesus would have proceeded west from the Fortress Antonia or the Behold the Man Arch, whatever, all the names that we mentioned a couple weeks ago, carrying his cross. And somewhere close by, they would have found this man, Simon. What is a quite possible distinguishing factor about Simon that some people may not consider? Anybody? What were the Cyrenians? They were very dark-complected people, okay? Very dark-complected people. All right, I'll leave it at that. So here he is, Simon, with his two boys, Rufus and Alexander. We see again that the Roman soldiers are basically heartless. They don't care that this man is here with his two sons. They are going to make him. And the word compel is more than a strong suggestion, okay? Either you do it or else is what we're looking at here. And now, why do you think maybe that they compelled him to carry Jesus' cross? Maybe not him necessarily just because of what he looked like or where he was from or that he had two boys, but why would they have someone carry the cross of Jesus? I would say so. Yeah, he wasn't in condition to do much of anything, let alone walk. Right? Although we know that he was going to walk to Calvary and do the Father's will, okay? But they compelled Simon. 3 of the Gospels share this. Not all of them do, okay? So, as we're going down, we come to a place and we take a north turn. So we're coming from over here and we're making a north turn right here on what today is called Al-Wad Street, okay? And this turns north. By the way, it's really interesting. I think the first time I took this walk was on a Sunday, and it was very busy, very busy. Now, I think it was the last trip that we took. Y'all remember? Probably about from where this picture is taken, there was a restaurant. Y'all thinking about that right now? Yeah, that we ate at. And oh, did they? Okay, where was it? Where the chairs were like right on the edge of the sidewalk. You remember that? You couldn't move them things hardly. Yeah, okay. All right, but anyway, yeah, so we started out here, okay? So then we would then walk to the north. So quite possibly this would still have been the journey that Christ would have taken. Because there's a gate that's at the end of this street, and it's referred to as the Damascus Gate. And this is the gate that would have went out north of the city. And it was called the Damascus Gate because if you were going to Damascus from in town, that's the way you would go. The road to Damascus was outside that gate, okay? And you can see the backside of this gate here, okay? Now, some of you may know, even without being there, what is an interesting feature about some gates to cities? Anybody? There's a turn, right? There's a turn. So when you come in the gate, the Damascus Gate, you have to turn which way? From the front, from the street, out front. You turn left, right? That way, when you approach the opening to the city, your right arm is exposed. What's in most soldiers' right arms? Their swords, right? Their shields are on their left. So this is their exposed side. So the gates, many gates were made like that. Me, I might have made it because I'm a lefty. I don't know. Whatever. It sounds good anyway. But right here is the back of the Damascus Gate. Now, this day, look how busy that was. And somebody made a comment, really? How are we supposed to get an understanding of what it must have been like when Jesus walked through here if all these people were here? Who has my next verse? Yeah, 23:27. Luke 23:27.
And there followed him a great company of people and women, which also bewailed and lamented him.
Okay. So it wasn't just like an open pathway for them to go through there. There was a mess load of people in the street that day. something like what we were experiencing here is pretty interesting, okay? And of course it says they lamented him and bewailed him because of the grave injustice that was done. I don't have it referenced, but right after that, Jesus says, don't cry for me, cry for your children, okay? Because you remember what the Jews said? What the Jews said when they called for Barabbas and said to crucify Jesus? Let us blood be upon us and our children. Absolutely. Yeah, you need to cry for your children. Okay? Somebody needs to tell them. And it needs to be you. Just kind of a side note. If you're saved, the first person that ought to ever tell your children is you. Yeah. I know we got Sunday school teachers. I know we got preachers, but the first time they ever hear the gospel, it really should be from you. Yep. And they should hear it frequently, and see it, okay? So they go on down, and they take, this is the outside of that gate. Okay, there's the back side, and then here's the outside facing the street. We're looking south, but the gate is facing north, okay? But just want to let you know something, that this is not the gate in the time of Jesus Christ. Another group of people came in and built this all up much later, but right down here would have been the gate, the Damascus gate during the time of Jesus, okay? Right down in this little hole right here, okay? And it's not as big as the other gate. It's from the old city, So when you come out of the old city, you got to remember something, that Jesus was crucified without the city, without the camp, okay? So we go out north of the old city at the time of Jesus Christ, which this would have been the northern wall, okay? And you climb up these stairs. There's at least one other flight beyond this, if I remember right. Yeah. It's set down in there quite a bit. And you walk up, and if you look back at our map, there's a little bit of a zigzag here, actually. When you come out of that Damascus gate, you cross. There's a little bit of a zigzag here. It's not straight across. There's a road that goes straight out across there. Would have been the old Damascus road, but you turn to the right a little bit, and this is called the Nablus Road, okay? Don't know if it was there at the time of Christ, but this is the way we had to go and walk up there. By the way, just out of view here, one of the best bagel places you'll ever find. And I don't mean little bagels like you put in your toaster. I mean horse collar bagels. You buy one for $1 and half of your group can eat off of it. So I remember Kyle buying one and sharing it with people. But anyway, so we walk up this street, I would say probably 2 blocks. And then we come to another place called the Garden Tomb, okay? And this is the place referred to as Gordon's Calvary and the Garden Tomb. You would then walk into the right. Obviously, the arrow goes that way. It might be 100 feet up this little way, and you come to a door or opening where they take your ticket and stuff like that, and you go in. Now, what we have here, this is actually a picture I took the first time I went. And this is called Golgotha, place of the skull. It is also referred to as Gordon's Calvary, okay? The reason it's referred to as Gordon's Calvary, Major General Charles George Gordon of the British Army believed this to be the location that Jesus was crucified because of the name Golgotha, place of the skull. Does anybody see it in this picture? And if you do, you can nod your head, but I don't want you to blurt it out. Do you see it in the picture? When you do, just kind of nod. Okay? All right. So, does anybody else see an eye socket? An eye socket. The bridge of a nose. Kind of looks like a skull. Did y'all see that before I pointed it out? Okay? Just so you know, I can't remember if it was before our last visit, just before our last visit, a portion of this had fallen off. Anybody ever heard of the Old Man in the Mountain? Is it New Hampshire or Vermont? There's an outcropping, and it looked like a face of a man. Well, about 5-6 years ago, the thing slid off. It was their biggest natural monument in the whole state. I don't know what they call it now. I don't know. But anyway, so this is something to consider. It's interesting. Now, we hear songs about Calvary's Hill. When that morning he walked up Calvary's Hill. Okay, just so you know, from Pilate's Hall to this location is uphill. There's no two ways about it. Okay, it's absolutely uphill. But many believe that the crucifixions did not take place up here. Many believe that the crucifixions took place down here by the road, where everybody that passed by could see them. I'm here to tell you, whether they happened here or up here, it still happened. Jesus still died on the cross for our sins. Okay? I didn't put a more modern picture up here, but since I took this picture in 2007, the Muslims, well, first of all, what you can't see just out of the shot here is a bus station. There's about 12 to 15 diesel chugging, smoking buses that sit right below this hill right here. There's a paved parking lot. And this is an area where you can get from the Garden Tomb and look out over to Golgotha. Up here, the Muslims, and the Muslims own this, by the way, which, listen, I tell you all the time, you know, like that big golden dome that's on top of the Temple Mount? Let them have it. Because what happens every time somebody comes into that city? They look right there. That's where the temple of God stood. And will again, by the way. Okay? So they can do what, but up here, they've got a wall, probably about as high as these cages. You can't see them anymore, so I don't know what's up with that. But there's a wall up here, kind of a lime rock type wall, and they've put words in it. And it says, Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. Could I read that? Absolutely not. Have y'all seen Arabic? What were those people drinking when they come up with that alphabet? I don't know. I mean, it's crazy to English people anyway. Okay, but so when we look at it, it looks very foreign, but it doesn't make a difference. They can build what they want to on it. It never changes the fact of what happened. Okay, all right. So the place of the skull. Now, I'm not going to get into the crucifixion itself so much tonight, but I do want to talk about. We're going to go back to the crucifixion. I'm also going to talk about some of the things that Jesus said on the cross tonight. But this is a model. You know, what you do with a model, it's the best understanding or rendering oftentimes that somebody can come up with based on historical documentation. Okay? There weren't a lot of drawings about things like this. Okay? But you know, a lot of times we think of these big railroad ties and this. I don't know if it was quite that elaborate. You know, I really don't know. But the fact of the matter is that this doesn't look very big. But if you remember correctly, when they were crucified, they weren't crucified like this. They were crucified like this. Okay, so they could not get their wind. Okay, and when they did, they'd have to push up like this. And this is why, of course, the legs of the thieves were broken, right, to hasten their death before the sun went down. But I do want to share the verse that Luke has because there's something really important in that verse. And when we read it, and I'll tell you what, Luke, you know, I was messing with you, told you I'd give you a cookie. Man, if you were to get what I'm thinking in this verse, I'd be almost willing to bake you a cake. All right? So, if you would read that verse, please. Yes.
There are also two
Okay. What's the most important thing in that verse of Scripture? You're right, they were criminals. Okay? I want everybody to look at it if you got it. What follows the word other? Huh? A comma. There were also two other malefactors. Not two other malefactors, because Jesus was not a malefactor. He didn't do anything wrong. There were also two other. What's that? Two other men. Okay? And they were malefactors. So this is why it's so important when we talk about context, we talk about punctuation, we talk about all that stuff. This is very important to understand that somebody could read, well, there were two other malefactors. No, the other two were malefactors based on how this is written. Okay? It's very important to get that. Okay, I'm going to share with you just a few things. We're going to go back to the crucifixion 3 weeks from now. Does that sound right? And but I want to share with you the 7 sayings that Jesus mentioned on the cross. By the way, the one thing that I failed to mention to you, we can look back here at this map. I thought I put the map up there. I guess I did not. Okay, I did not. Okay, so there's another map that I put up here to show you. It's a satellite view, but there is up over here is the bus station. You probably can't really tell it, but there's a little bus right there. There's the bus station. Up in here is the backside of that station at the edge of Golgotha. Back up in here is the tomb. Another reason that it's believed that this was the same place that Jesus was crucified, because there was a tomb in a garden, maybe 200 feet from the position of the crucifixion. Maybe 200 feet. Okay? Some will tell you, you read it, they say that tomb's too old, it was a brand new tomb, et cetera, et cetera. For all intents and purposes, as far as I'm concerned, that's the tomb. If it wasn't, it don't make any difference. Because the tomb that he was in is no longer occupied. Okay? Yeah. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Okay? But the 7 sayings from the cross that I want to share with you, because I probably won't go into that when we talk more about the crucifixion, because I want to talk more about the crucifixion itself, is the mindset that Jesus had. Even though he had been beaten, even though he the Roman soldiers enlisted help for him to carry this cross, somebody that was there with me, how far, I know it was uphill, but how far do you think that was? Was it a half a mile? Was it that far? Huh? Is it really about a mile?
It's less than a mile.
Oh, okay. So that's a pretty good trek just anyway. I mean, uphill, etc. But the fact of the matter is that Jesus probably wasn't a very big man, okay? And he was beaten beyond recognition. He was bleeding. He was bruised and bloodied and wounded. But we see that after they got there, and then they would nail him to the cross, adding insult to injury, if you will, he still said these things while he was on the cross. In Luke chapter 23, verse 34, it says, "Then Jesus said, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.' And they parted his raiment and cast lots." I think it gives you a pretty good idea what Jesus came for. He came to save. He came to forgive. Okay? We see in Luke 23, 43, "And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise." Who was he talking to? Thief on a cross, one of the thieves, one of the malefactors, right? He was talking to one of those guys. And guess what? Today, that day, he was with him in paradise. And that the study about paradise is a whole other thing. But can I tell you what? What makes it paradise? What he says just before that. Today, thou shalt be with me. That's good. That's good. Okay? As we move on, The third saying, when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved, he saith unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then saith he to the disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour that disciple took her unto his own home. Jesus was taking care of his things as he was dying. The most important thing was his mother. Joseph is probably gone by this time. You don't hear much about Joseph after Bethlehem and the temple at the age 12, right? So we see that Jesus was making sure she would be taken care of, which she had been taken care of by somebody because he'd been living out under the stars for the last 3.5 years, right? But the one that he was talking to had been living with him out under the stars. The fourth saying is, in about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Somebody quickly, tell me what you think happened there. God turned his back on him. God is a holy and righteous God, and he cannot look upon iniquity. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, and he who knew no sin became sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. At that moment, the sin of the world was on Jesus Christ. God turned away. And listen, folks, a lot of times we talk about darkness, and we see movies, and the best that I can gather and when I study, we're talking about darkness. Y'all ever been in a cave? Darkness. Okay? We see the fifth saying was, after this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, saith, I thirst. And we know that this was a prophecy of while Jesus was on the cross. See, the Lord was so good to us. We'll say to these people because it happened in their time. He was so good to them that there were so many indicators that they should have picked up on that this is the Christ. Even after the moment they had crucified him and called for his crucifixion and had him whipped and beaten and carried off to Calvary and nailed to a cross, he's still giving them indicators that says, it is me. It is me. And guess what? They could have still believed on him right then and there. You know how I know that? Because they could have believed on him before, during, and certainly we can believe on him after. Okay? Number 6, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished, and bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Okay? So 6 and 7 are very closely related. Okay? It's about order in the way you find them in the scriptures. So we know that giving up the ghost, that Jesus died. Okay? He died. He didn't swoon. He didn't just go unconscious. He wasn't being considered for, someone that was just slowing their heart rate down. He was dead. But he also said, and when Jesus cried with a loud voice, okay, he said, now just remember, and Jesus, when he had cried with a loud voice, he had already cried with a loud voice, and then he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. So 6 and 7 fit together, okay? You remember sometimes how we've talked that some of the writers write some details and the other writers write some of the other details? So that's why we study it all together, okay? Everybody has a part of what God has revealed to us. So, next time we're together, we will be discussing the crucifixion itself. We'll take a little time to look at some things about the crucifixion and how cruel it really was. And then, of course, we move on to the resurrection. That's always a fun thing to talk about. And then his time here afterwards, and then we'll get to the ascension, and we'll wrap it up. I was asked tonight, do I know how much longer it's going to last? I really don't. Do I know how many more slides it's going to be? I really don't. I hope you're not tired of it, because we're nearing the end. We're nearing the end of the most incredible story ever told. So, so for the next couple of weeks, Brother Ben will be preaching at Gant Lake on Wednesday night, and then we will have camp the following week. He'll be preaching Tuesday night at camp. So, but due to the COVID situation, we are not encouraging people to come out and visit at the camp. So we will not suspend Wednesday evening services for people